Oh boy. Yeah, no, those two videos I got a lot of feedback on. No, when I specifically ask what rights were taken away under Trump, I mean, they can't say. I don't think any of those women's rights were taken away under Trump. And now that he's not, agreed to not do the nationwide abortion ban, and now that he's moving forward with wanting to protect IVF, it's just one of those things they continue to say because, frankly, they have nothing else to say. And then, obviously, these are the same women that are single voter issues. They only care about aborting children. And then when it comes to protecting women by keeping men out of sports, out of our spaces, and dangerous men out of our country, they're completely silent on. So they don't actually care about women's rights or protecting them. Once again, they don't know what a woman is, so it wouldn't matter either way.
Morally superior liberals are like, I would never vote for a felon. But here's our statue of George Floyd.
It's just funny to have different standards. You're like, this is fine, but this isn't fine. That's the whole point of that. You don't need to read that deeply into it. It's not that big of a deal.
It's funny to have different. Do you have different standards for different people? Isn't that the point, to have different standards for different people? Like,
yeah.
The point is,
I know,
more
once again, that's a joke.
They
It goes
uplift
far
George
over
Floyd. They
liberals'
put
heads.
him on murals. They have tattoos. People have tattoos of George Floyd. They uplift him as this amazing, heroic individual. And the point that she's making is less about George Floyd being president. It's the way that they degrade Donald Trump. Because yes, it is not a glorious thing that we have a presidential candidate who has felonies on his hands, but what is more her point that she's making here is that they are degrading him, making it seem like he's this awful person, like he is the worst person to have ever walked this earth. But then George Floyd, who has this terrible rap sheet, he is uplifted to the heavens by the left. So it's not about him being president.
In this one, Emily Wilson and Xaviaer DuRousseau completely embarrass woke streamer Destiny, and even Jill Stein cooks for a little bit. I'm really looking forward to showing you guys this one. This one's fun and informative. So let's get her started.
Let me start with you, Destiny, if I can. The honeymoon was on fire for Kamala Harris. The coronation happened. The DNC convention happened. It was all going swimmingly. And you would have expected the polls to reflect this glorious few weeks of the anointment of Kamala Harris as the joyous, brave new way forward to save America. And yet the latest New York Times poll of likely voters nationally has Trump ahead of Kamala Harris. How can that be?
I mean, we've still got a lot of work to do. And I mean, the polls are all over the place. This is a historic environment for a political election. Who knows where the polls are going to be a week or two from now. Everything is still changing. Yeah.
And here's a fun little sample size video that I wanted to show you guys. Just a little bit of an indicator of what we might see coming up here in November.
You've sold thousands already, and I know you've baked thousands in preparation for tonight.
Yes.
Everyone wants to know, what do the sales maybe tell us about who might win the election in November?
Well,
talk to me about sales.
The sales, the red is leading by a lot.
By a lot.
By a lot.
You got the tally board over here.
The tally was just updated. You're new to see it, but almost by 4,000 cookies, as you can see, and that's tremendous. Tremendous for us as a small business to produce this and sell this as well, and see the faces that are coming around to buy these from all over.
Absolutely, and just to stress this, that is not a typo. Former President Trump with more than 4,000 cookies sold. Current Vice President Kamala Harris with only about 400. So the Harris voters got some work to do if they want to boost their numbers here. But again, we want to stress, we've been saying this all morning, you guys are not politically driven. I know you take a lot of flack online especially.
And look, I know, you got to take these type of things with a grain of salt. Somebody could have went in there and bought 2,000 cookies or whatever. This was just a fun little story that I wanted to share with you guys. So, okay, let's get back to the debate.
How important do you think tomorrow night's debate could be? I mean, the last debate ended the political career of Joe Biden. It precipitated the events that led to him quitting the race. Could this determine tomorrow night 90 minutes of Trump v. Harris live in front of the American people and the watching world? Could it trigger effectively the end of this race?
I feel like debates aren't really important until they are. Historically, debates haven't seemed to move the needle too much when it comes to favorability or desire to vote for a particular candidate. But I mean, obviously in the last debate, because people had a perception about Joe Biden that seemed to be true, after watching the debate, that shifted the needle significantly. So, I mean, it's hard to say. It could be that tomorrow both of them do their thing. You know, Kamala gives her sassy pushback. Trump gives his normal, meandering, stupid, brainless answers, and nobody really cares much about what happens because everything goes as expected. So, or it could be that one of them has a huge, step out moment, that one of them loses their cool, and maybe that moves the needle a lot. It's really hard to say. I think making predictions in this election at this point is pretty much impossible.
Well, on that, I completely agree with you. Xavier, you reposted on X, day one of the Black Voters for Trump tour was a massive success. The next time the left tells you MAGA is nothing more than a bunch of old white guys, show them this picture, the next generation of Black America will destroy the Democrat Party. And you said about Kamala Harris in August, a woman who's confident in what she stands for would be able to not only handle but address and overcome the criticism. Kamala Harris doesn't have that same resilience. Not even the left will respect her after about a year, once the honeymoon of electing a black woman wears off. Strong words there, but what is interesting to me is how Trump's support amongst black Americans has been consistently increasing in the last year. And you've seen it being eroded from the Democrats, which is almost unprecedented, really, in modern times. Why do you think that is happening?
And if you enjoy content like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get back to it.
Well, it's largely happening because we're tired of being lied to. I mean, for how much longer can we have the Democrats telling us over and over that they are going to do all these great promises for us just to not follow through with anything? I mean, just look at the way back in 2020, Joe Biden went and acted like he was going to be the biggest spokesperson for BLM. Then the second he got into office, he had nothing to do with the black community anymore. We have seen these lies play out time and time again, and it's exhausting. We see the way that our economy is in shambles. We see the way that our border is wide open. We see all these pressing issues that are not being addressed properly by the Democratic Party. And at this point, it's like, what do black men have to lose? Why would we continue to go the same way that is clearly not working for us? Why don't we try something different and get away from the Democratic Party? And that's why more eyes are beginning to open up, because for far too long, we were told we weren't even allowed to consider conservative views or conservative policies. We were called coons and Uncle Toms and all these different slurs. And why is that? Because they wanted to take away our power. They wanted to take away our power to think for ourselves and to go out and seek the truth. And that's why so many more black men are starting to go for Donald Trump, because we ultimately want a better future for ourselves and for our next generations.
I mean, Jill Stein, it's been the presidential race this year where absolutely nothing could be predicted. It's been a roller coaster ride, the like of which we've never seen. This debate could be enormously transformative in the way the last one was. What do you think Kamala Harris needs to do to try and defeat Donald Trump tomorrow?
I think it's highly unlikely that this debate is going to capture the spirit of the American people. I think we're seeing the two parties basically fail. Well, I think we are seeing the two parties failed to address the healthcare crisis, to address the housing crisis, where 50% of all Americans are basically one or two paychecks away from eviction, can't afford their rent. 63% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And yet we are spending half of our congressional budget on the endless war machine. And by the way, the vast majority of Americans want an end to the genocide going on in Gaza, and yet, as well as a weapons embargo to make that happen. Yet we are not seeing the two major candidates actually address either of these crises, and there's basically an unwritten agreement that we will not address the basically the dominance of Wall Street and the war machine over our economy, over our lives. The voters have basically been thrown under the bus, so it's no wonder that both candidates, I think, what you see largely are people voting against the candidate that they hate the most instead of for the candidate that they want.
If, though, the majority of Americans shared your view, why would the Green Party not be doing a lot better in the polling?
Well, for one thing, we're not covered by mainstream media, with the exception of, a few minutes here today, and thank you so much for that.
Of course.
But we are systematically suppressed. And let me just say that the Democrats have pulled out all the stops in order to throw us off the ballot. They have their army of lawyers in order to not just deny third parties, but to deny voters what voters have actually been vehemently clamoring for. At record numbers, 63% of Americans are now saying they need other choices, and in this election. So the American voters really want other choices here. Those are being denied. The Democrats have also publicly advertised for infiltrators and spies in order to disrupt our ballot drives, and this is their strategy. They do not want to face us in the court of public opinion, keep us out of debates, keep us out of press coverage, fear campaign and smear campaign against us so that they can simply eliminate their competition. They are quaking in their boots. They have also hijacked our public funding, which we qualified for in order to prevent us from getting on the ballot. However, we are largely prevented.
Now, I'm not this huge Jill Stein fan. Frankly, I don't know much about her at all, but I tend to believe her here. Look at how the Democrats treated RFK Jr. Biden claimed he was staying in the race, that he was strong, and that he was going to beat Trump in 2024, and the mainstream media backed him. Kamala Harris backed him, said that he was fine, strong, smart, all these things. Then once the time frame for primaries had passed, Biden just suddenly stepped out and handed the keys over to Kamala, thus preventing the American citizens the opportunity to vote for RFK Jr. as opposed to Joe Biden in the Democratic primaries. Also, to Jill Stein's point there, the Democratic Party was sending people into the Republican primaries to vote for Nikki Haley because they were trying to keep Trump off the ballot. It's a dirty game. The Democrats are willing to pull no punches. They will lie, cheat, and steal in order to win any election and to take the power. They never want the power to be in the people's hands. They want the power to be in their own hands. And sorry if you hear the chicken. I got an injured chicken inside taking care of her, so...
How do you feel about Kamala Harris's U-turn on fracking?
Well, she's done a lot of U-turns. I mean, This is to be expected. She puts her fingers to the wind and basically, she's done a U-turn on immigration. She's pulling back on the tax, the increase in the capital gains tax, which Biden had promised, and this is typical of the Democrats. They went into the last election saying they were going to fight for a $15 minimum wage. They wouldn't even bring that to a vote, that they would stand for workers, yet they basically forced the railroad workers to accept a contract that they had already rejected, which created very dangerous working conditions, which laid the groundwork for the catastrophe in East Palestine. They long ago, Barack Obama was talking about the public option as an alternative so that people could actually afford their health care instead of this crisis that we continue to have to this day. Yet where was it? The public option disappeared. The supposed bulk purchasing for pharmaceuticals that would bring down that price. Well, that became 10 pharmaceuticals by 2026 where the price would be reduced. So, what we hear from the Democrats basically is a lot of lip service. From the Republicans, we really don't hear much at all. They don't even make promises. But Democrats make promises and then break them, which is basically, driving people into the arms of Donald Trump. The most spoiled elections that the Democrats ever had was 2010, following the Wall Street bailouts, while millions of homeowners got thrown out. There was the Democratic trifecta, basically bailing out Wall Street and throwing working people under the bus. That is why people are moving to the right. That is why people are so hungry for other options. As you were saying in your previous segment, what we must have is a debate. If we can't actually have a debate in our elections, when are we going to have a real debate? And you don't get that from two parties that are bought and paid for by the same, very powerful economic interests, by the war machine, by Wall Street, by AIPAC, etc.
I don't disagree with you.
I wasn't planning on giving Jill Stein that much time on this video, but she was cooking, so I let her cook. And now we're going to get into the fun stuff. So here we go.
I disagree with you. Emily Wilson, just want to talk about something. You posted on video on X saying morally superior liberals are like, I would never vote for a felon, Trump, but here's our statue of George Floyd. Another video you said about women. I'm sorry, I'm so tired of the tens of thousands online saying I'm going to vote for her, Kamala Harris, because he's going to strip away all our rights. What rights? He was already president. What rights did you lose? Zero. He's trying to protect women's rights. Now, there'll be lots of women on the left who will say he's trying to destroy women's rights, and that the whole abandonment of Roe versus Wade after he packed the Supreme Court with conservative judges was specifically designed to remove women's rights. What do you say to that?
Oh boy. Yeah, no, those two videos I got a lot of feedback on. No, when I specifically ask what rights were taken away under Trump, I mean, they can't say. I don't think any of those women's rights were taken away under Trump. And now that he's not, agreed to not do the nationwide abortion ban, and now that he's moving forward with wanting to protect IVF, it's just one of those things they continue to say because, frankly, they have nothing else to say. And then, obviously, these are the same women that are single voter issues. They only care about aborting children. And then when it comes to protecting women by keeping men out of sports, out of our spaces, and dangerous men out of our country, they're completely silent on. So they don't actually care about women's rights or protecting them. Once again, they don't know what a woman is, so it wouldn't matter either way. And yeah, I just think it's funny that the morally superior liberals are so quick to be like, Trump's a felon, he's a bad guy, and all these things. Yeah, and they're like, no, felons should be able to vote and do all these things. They're like, unless it's Donald Trump. But George Floyd was apparently an amazing person, so.
Morally superior liberals are like, I would never vote for a felon. But here's our statue of George Floyd.
Well, George Floyd was brutally murdered by a police officer who was convicted of brutally murdering him. And unfortunately, we saw it all on a cell phone. Otherwise, it would have probably never been reported.
A lot of people still have questions about that situation. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are.
I can see you shaking your head there, Destiny. You want to say
this
something?
happens all the time. Whenever you debate conservatives, I mean, it's happened here. I've seen it happen in other places. It'll be like, here's the standards for, Republican lawmakers. And then they'll point to like people on Twitter on the other side. Like, well, what about that person? Well, I don't remember voting for George Floyd for president or nominating him for president. The idea that that's your basis of comparison, like, oh, you've got a problem with Donald Trump. Well, what about George Floyd? It's just such a hilariously telling, I think, example.
Well, let me ask you a difficult question.
Well, he was also a criminal that overdosed, but that's another situation.
That still doesn't get him any closer to being nominated for president of the Democratic Party. I don't understand what the comparison is for.
It's just funny to have different standards. You're like, this is fine, but this isn't fine. That's the whole point of that. You don't need to read that deeply into it. It's not that big of a deal.
It's funny to have different. Do you have different standards for different people? Isn't that the point, to have different standards for different people? Like.
Yeah.
The point is,
I know,
more
once again, that's a joke. It goes
uplift
far
George
over
Floyd. They put him on murals. They have tattoos. People have tattoos of George Floyd. They uplift him as this amazing, heroic individual. And the point that she's making is less about George Floyd being president. It's the way that they degrade Donald Trump. Because yes, it is not a glorious thing that we have a presidential candidate who has felonies on his hands, but what is more her point that she's making here is that they are degrading him, making it seem like he's this awful person, like he is the worst person to ever walk this earth. But then George Floyd, who has this terrible rap sheet, he is uplifted to the heavens by the left. So it's not about him being president.
Well,
simply what she did was use their words against them. They're all hypocrites, and she exposed it. And the funniest part about it is Destiny doesn't even recognize it. And what he's been trying to do lately is draw this distinction between the political candidates and the actual voters, right? He's like, well, they're not the same. Show me somebody at the top that passed this policy or went and represented this. And it's like, dude, the reason why the voters elect these people is because these people align with their beliefs. So trying to separate the political candidates from the voters as if it's not relevant is completely stupid. And it's just a tactic that these people like David Pacman and Destiny have been doing lately to try to make the political candidates look better than they actually are.
Well, let's not.
It's just so stupid. I'm sorry. I love my mom to death. She's one of the best people in the world. She would make a horrible president. Okay, if my mom was auditioning to be my mom, I would be #1 her supporter. If my mom was auditioning for president, I'd be her biggest hater on the internet. Like, obviously, you have different standards for different people. This is such an insane point. Why would you even try to defend this? At least let her dance away gracefully.
And also, the entire point is the left
right?
has different standards for everything except for Donald Trump. That's the whole point. Anything he does is horrible, but if anyone other
let's talk about. I tell you what. Let's talk about.
Point of the video.
So that's a good place to wrap this video up. They move on to the next topic of conversation after that. And my final thoughts are, if Destiny is a representative of the majority of Democratic voters in this country, we're in for another long 4 terrible years of Democrats destroying the country. Because his hatred for Donald Trump supersedes everything bad that the Democratic Party does for America and for Americans. And it's truly sad and it's scary. But with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Also, share this video. That's what helps out the most. We need to reach out to new people. And if you think this is good content, make sure you show it to them. And then also, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. And I'll see you guys in the next video.